From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Got it right that time. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Tuesday in May. It has been a busy week for the Banner Baseball Show. We went live on Friday with Kyle Goon, went live on Saturday to react to the firing of manager Brandon Hyde, and now we are live on Tuesday to discuss the first three games of the Tony Mansolino era, and we are going to do just that. We'll also talk about the fact that the Orioles designated Kyle Gibson for assignment. We have much to discuss today, but first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, John, things have gotten so bad in Birdland that people are sending you physical snail mail of printed out stats of Kyle Stowers and Heston Kjerstad. That's how bad things have gotten.
Yeah, it's that was a strange one.
You walked in today and there was a letter for you with no return address. And it was somebody had printed out the stats of it was Stowers, Kjerstad, and a couple other players. And they said, there's a choice here. It felt like the Riddler from Batman was sending you something.
Yeah, I mean, I feel truly bad for the baseball transactions that I made over the course of the last year. I think that I would, I feel terrible about all the things that I did. But
they made it seem like it was your fault.
Yeah, but I did, I do write about them. My name goes like right at the beginning of like the headline of the column. So I understand, any ire that would be directed to me. And I also, I think that stands in stark contrast with an unsigned letter.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that email me instead. I probably will not
reply.
I typically don't find time to get back to those either. But, it's interesting. This is it's pretty dark. I was, to get into the Kyle Gibson part of this, which I think we're going to start. I filed my column on Saturday around game time ish, and I just needed to like take a lap. Like I needed to like get up and walk around because it was kind of just like a, not a stressful write, but it was a heavy experience. It was a hectic couple of hours, and Kyle Gibson didn't make an out as I made it before I made it all the way around the concourse of Camden Yards, like not even cutting around the inside, all the way around the outside. And it was interesting gauging the reaction to what was happening, because obviously it was terrible. You could hear like the small pockets of cheers from the Nationals fans, but it was just a lot of people who, I think there is anger. You don't need to look far to find anger, but it's just a lot of like resignation already. And it's not even Memorial Day yet.
It is a lot of resignation already. It's a frustrated, angry fan base. For this to happen so early in the season is an absolute disaster, and we'll talk about later on in the show where this team is at. But let's start first with Kyle Gibson. Oh, by the way,
I'm Kyle Goon now.
Oh, you are Kyle Goon. Wow. I had that up on the lower third. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Now we're switched. There we go. I got it.
There we go.
We are live on YouTube and X every week, and running the show at the same time as hosting the show can be a challenge for me. By the way, if you're going to be responding or telling us that we're idiots, please do so in our Apple podcast reviews, because I'll read it out here on the show if you give us a 5-star review. And John, we got a review.
Hey.
We got a 5-star review from Oligo XP. It says, great show. I grew up in York, PA, and an alum of Towson University, or as Brandon Hyde refers to it, Towson State. I now live in Michigan and really enjoy the weekly recap on what's going on with the team, given how off the rails this season has been. I love this team. I still enjoy hearing about them, even when I don't feel like watching. Keep up the great work, guys. I will do that to your podcast. I will not do that to your letter if you handwrite a letter and print out stats and send them to John.
Yeah.
It's a little weird.
We haven't talked about this, and not to make light of it, but was the Towson State gaffe the last straw?
Hey,
Brandon Hyde was not here during the Towson State era. It has always been Towson University.
Which is crazy that so why would he even think that it would be Towson State? Also, I learned my lesson. I've said on previous podcasts, I called it Towson in a banner sports video, and I understand. So I sympathize, I empathize with Brandon Hyde, because I have You replaced the S in Towson with a Z before, and I got absolutely roasted by people.
Yeah, well, just based on the results of that, if you get a meeting dropped onto your calendar with HR, just don't show. Just leave the office, say you have a doctor's appointment.
And they'll schedule the location of that meeting in Towson.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Kyle Gibson. 4 starts, 16.78 ERA. The Orioles said that's enough of that. They designated him for assignment. He had signed a $5.25 million deal on March 22nd, right before the season starts. When they did that, when they added him to the rotation, or at least added him to the roster and began his ramp up to join the rotation, my concern was, all right, are they really worried about Albert Suarez and his ability to produce quality results in 2025? Albert Suarez made 1 appearance in 2025 and then got hurt. And then my next thought was, how hurt is Grayson Rodriguez? Turns out very hurt, and he has suffered setbacks along the way, and we have yet to see Grayson Rodriguez. Kyle Gibson was supposed to be rotation insurance, and instead he ended up being worse for the rotation than anybody else who had been in there. And it stinks because we like Kyle Gibson. He seems like a good guy. He seems like a great clubhouse presence. He was only on the team for like 3 weeks, and during that time he was able to impart some wisdom and call a team meeting with the pitchers. He just, at 37 years old, does not appear to have anything left in the tank.
Yeah, and there's a long line of pitchers who sign late and don't have the normal build up, who don't start their seasons well. They certainly don't start them this badly. And I think that we're seeing a situation where just add another thing to the pile of decisions that the Orioles made that could not have gone more badly in the actual outcomes of them. I was looking up for morbid curiosity, like the percentile, like basically to run a projection system for baseball, you run thousands and thousands of simulations, you average them out, and like what's in the middle is what you see. So when somebody says, oh, this guy's projected to have like a 750 OPS, that's the middle. Could be better, could be worse. Kyle Gibson's worst case, first percentile season was a 6.7 ERA with a 1.76 whip. He is significantly worse than that in the moment. If this was a scenario where, you know, God knows we had enough conversations about Charlie Morton, but the next time we get a chance to talk about Charlie Morton, his ERA might start with a 7, and we're getting closer to what you would expect. Not that anything that happened is good. The Orioles lost a lot of games that Charlie Morton pitched. I believe every game that Charlie Morton has pitched still.
Yeah, I think so.
So that's not to say that you can have patience, but this is just something that did not work out in any way, shape, or form. I was thinking back to what we talked about when this happened. It was, this would have been somebody on a minor league deal making $700,000 if they're in the big leagues a year ago, and now they have money and they can spend it. And I don't think this was. I think that there was always a time when Kyle Gibson was going to join this rotation at the end of April or early May. I think Michael I said one time there's like contractual considerations. Okay, so he could be in the minors for X amount of time, and then you have to bring him up. I don't think you could have envisioned a world where he wouldn't be needed to be. Every world is he would be needed to be better than he was. There's not a world where you can be like, okay, cool, congrats, you're doing great.
Yeah, you have a 16 ERA.
Yes, but it's the same thing of, we talk about Charlie Morton, we talk about Cade Povich, because of all the other things that happen around them, they don't have any opportunity to not be good. They just have to be good. And when you're not, you're not.
Yeah, and this team is paying Charlie Morton already, and he has been a disaster in the rotation. Seems like perhaps he may have found his footing in the bullpen, but they're paying Charlie Morton about 3 times what they're paying Kyle Gibson. And so they are more contractually incentivized to make it work with Charlie Morton. And you can't keep Kyle Gibson. You just were not going to do to Kyle Gibson what you did to Charlie Morton. You didn't have room in the bullpen to just move him over to a bullpen role and get 2 very old former starter long men in your bullpen. They just had to rip the Band-Aid off at this point. And it was an utter disaster of a season, and it was so bad that, there's certainly a lot of thinking that, I mean, from my side of things, I don't know if Kyle Gibson returns to the big leagues on any team. He might just call it a career after this, because it was certainly, it's not how you want to go out, but it didn't seem like there was much left there.
Yeah, I mean, there was some messaging. It seemed like that he could still stay in the organization. I don't really take that at, I take that for what it's worth. He could choose to go to Norfolk and try to figure it out if he wants to. I'm sure this would not be how he wants to end his major league career, but I think he could, look to his left at Charlie Morton's locker and have a conversation about continuing to pitch when the main motivation to do so is not liking how your last outing went.
Right.
You can end up digging yourself a hole that is worse than, the hole you're in by doing that. But
it's like losing a hand at blackjack, and then you just keep doubling down and doubling down.
Yeah, but I think the Orioles also need to think long and hard, honestly, about, Kyle Gibson's making this money. That money's going to him, whether he pitches in Norfolk and tries to figure this out or not. But at some point, this organization needs to, especially if the season's going the way that it is, needs to have pitchers who are on the upswing pitching in the Norfolk rotation and not necessarily pitchers who are just there to be there and, break glass in case of emergency.
True. And in terms of the strategy that led the Orioles to signing Kyle Gibson, they probably looked at similar projections and saw that, okay, well, worst case scenario is he has a 6.7 ERA and we just end up DFAing him and he's gone, or we move him to the bullpen because Charlie Morton will be good. But at a certain point, we've talked about the cliff comes for everybody, and age is such a big factor here. And to just think that a guy who's 37 is going to replicate his production from last season just because he just did it doesn't work out. And it's a strategy that has hurt the Orioles with Charlie Morton, and now it's hurt them with Kyle Gibson. It's just, it doesn't always work out like that. And once you hit a certain age physically, all of a sudden that it's not a slow decline, it's a cliff. And both those guys have fallen off the cliff.
Yes. And there's a real, we talked about the blame pie.
We did. Worst flavor of pie of all time.
Yeah, gross. I think these two pitchers probably games they're pitched. There's some overlap probably, but we're probably talking about like 0-16.
Yeah.
Which is how many games the Orioles are under 500.
There you go. All right. Well, let's talk about this team that is 16 games under 500 that has been 0-3 in the Tony Mansolino era. The Orioles finally did something. I was talking with Kyle on Friday about how you reached a certain point where the risk of not doing something was greater than the risk of doing something and making a decision. Mike Elias didn't have too many levers to pull. He couldn't dramatically change the lineup. He couldn't force a trade this is in a video game where he can turn on forced trades and force a trade for a starting pitcher that was going to somehow save this team. He pulled the lever that he had in front of him, and that was firing Brandon Hyde. So the do something crowd, the crowd that just wanted to see something happen to try to wake the team up, for a moment, they were satiated, but they can't be pleased with the results of pulling that lever. It's like, John, we talked about before the show, you haven't seen The Emperor's New Groove. It's an outstanding old Disney movie, but there is a scene where Yzma and Kronk, who are the two bad guys, Kronk is more just a lovable idiot, but Yzma asks him to pull the lever to go down to their secret lair. Kronk pulls the wrong lever, and as she's falling down the pit, she says, "Wrong lever," and then goes down, and then eventually comes back up.
It's a cartoon,
pulls the right. Yeah, it's a cartoon. The Orioles, I don't know if they pulled the wrong lever. I don't know if they had any other lever necessarily to pull, but it seems like this was not a move that had the desired impact so far. We're 0-3 in the new era, and they lost 10-6, 10-4, and now 5-4 yesterday to the Brewers.
Yeah. I think, and I wrote as it happened, you can't start winning until you stop losing, and they have not stopped losing yet. So that is, I suppose that still remains true.
Yeah.
Although the impetus of writing that in changing the manager hasn't really made a difference. I think that, is it the wrong lever? It depends, and we're going to find out today, what the front office is thinking beyond the statement that they gave in doing this was. Have they won? No. Could they have won yesterday? Yes, they could have won yesterday. Absolutely, they could have won yesterday. It doesn't seem like this is the type of thing that I think it could have had an immediate impact, but I think you are now, just because you're cleaning the slate doesn't mean it doesn't get dirty again. I think this is, if I had to guess, the only way that the front office thought, like, we still might not be good for a couple weeks, but if we are going to get good and like anything is going to feel different at any point in the season, then we need to do something. Maybe they knew, because this is a team that hasn't dealt with anything like this before, because these players are early in their major league careers for the most part. And like, this is an experience that they have not dealt with, that there would be a shock and there would be an adjustment period, and they might lose anyways in the near term. But for there to be any kind of benefit long term, they needed to just do it now. I don't know the extent that's true. I just feel like, to answer the question of the wrong lever, it doesn't seem like there were many other levers to pull. And this is something that we've talked about for a long time. The hitting operation in this organization is completely independent of the manager's office. The pitching operation in this organization is completely independent of the manager's office. They have both been remodeled in the last 2 years. Drew French and those guys, Mitch Plasmeyer, came up to the big league level 2 years ago. Cody Ashley took over the hitting side last year. They are the head. Not, I don't know, heads of snake means like a bad thing, I suppose. So, but like, they are the tops of like a very like elaborate totem pole on either side. And to change those is to make more changes than you want to make in the middle of a terrible baseball season. It's gone nowhere like you think. So in that sense, this was the lever they had to pull. You're not going to sit here at 0-3 and say like, attaboy Mike.
Right. You philosophically are not going to change the things that got you there when you are 2 months into the season. It's just very, very difficult to do. It requires a total refresh of brain trust. It just does not make sense to do at that point in the season. But also, it's unfair to Brandon Hyde, because he ended up being the one that bore the brunt of it, but you could probably place more blame on the system that got them here, on the system that has churned out these poor results. And if the hitting operation, like you say, John, and the pitching operations are totally separate from the managerial's office, those are the two areas that I would be worried the most about, not the manager.
Yeah.
And it's clear that a different voice at the top in Tony Mansolino hasn't really changed the way this team plays. I mean, they have had a couple nice rallies, so to speak, on Saturday's game and Sunday's game, I guess. And yesterday, Cedric Mullins hits that 3-run homer, and they tie the game back up. But it's not like we're seeing a market difference in the fight that this team has. And the question that I asked on Saturday was, is Michael Eyes firing Brandon Hyde now in order to send a jolt through his team and try to get them to wake up and take more responsibility and try to go on a massive run towards the playoffs in the final 4 months of the season? Or is he just acknowledging that this season is cooked and it's over, and I'm going to fire Brandon Hyde at the end of the season no matter what, so I might as well do it now? If he was hoping for the former, he was sorely mistaken, because it hasn't done that. And the risk you run when you fire your manager in the middle of the season, especially one who's been here as long as Brandon Hyde has, you run the risk of sending your players into disillusionment and making your players now worry about their futures and having them react poorly to this and side more with the manager who just got fired than the front office who fired him. Dean Kramer talked after yesterday's game. I don't want to try to make this quote sound like more than it was, but he said, we have, in talking about both Tim Cousins, who was also fired, and Brandon Hyde, he said, we have their back more than could be portrayed, which was either to me a shot at the media, who anybody who might have said that the team doesn't have Brandon Hyde's back, or perhaps the front office that might think that the Orioles would respond well to this move, when in fact they might side with the manager that just got fired and think, well, why did Brandon Hyde take the brunt of this? It's not his fault that the talent on the field isn't as good.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack there. I would say that Brandon Hyde, when we're talking about, first of all, I would say that if we are going to place the
blame pie, how much is the blame
gosh,
pie?
yeah. So yeah, give me my knife. Knives out. If we are going to place present day responsibility on the hitting side and on the pitching side, I would say that Brandon Hyde was the manager until Saturday because of all the good things that those departments were able to do. If the hitting department wasn't able to develop uh, for three homegrown all-stars and like
A bunch.
an incredibly deep and talented lineup and improve players who were here before they got here and get players they drafted to the big leagues. And if the pitching side wasn't able to help Felix Bautista figure out how to make those like 7-foot tall levers work and make Yannier Cano an all-star and get Kyle Bradish to the big leagues and make Tyler Wells into a reasonable starter and help Grayson Rodriguez get it. If all those things didn't work, then Brandon Hyde is not the manager of this team until Saturday. This is a complete disaster, and we're not talking about any of the people that we are talking about now. So I think that's something that's important to know as we're doing all this. In terms of getting a spark, I think that it's probably really complicated inside that clubhouse too, because you have players who don't really know what it's like to play for other players by and large, the ones we're talking about.
I mean, for other managers.
For other managers, yes. I don't think I'm trying to parse out what Dean Kramer said in a way that
nobody knows Dean like you do, John.
Yeah, we have a lot in common. I don't think he meant, I would say he probably didn't mean anything by it. I think that if I had to guess, that is a response to the idea that this team, like that the clubhouse was lost or that there was a bad culture. I think I probably would be told the truth. But every time that comes up in a conversation that I have with a player, somebody who's in that clubhouse off the record, they don't really understand it. It's not something that they're like, some players absorb it more than others. Most of them try to stay away from social media for incredibly obvious reasons. And how that gets to them is that like someone they live with, like their wives or their girlfriends or their friends are like, do you see this? Like, what do you think? Like, is this true? And they're like, what?
Right.
So that type of thing, it's like, it's not about not playing for the manager. They understand that they're underperforming, and they also go on these trips and road trips like baseball teams do. And the plane is full of guys that aren't playing. Like Jordan Westberg and Colton Cowser and Tyler O'Neill are not playing. Like, sometimes Kyle Bradish and Tyler Wells are going on these trips and not playing. Andrew Kittredge is on this trip. He's not playing. Like, these are the players who are meant to be helping this team be as good as they want. And I know that it sounds stupid for me to keep saying this, but it's a real thing. This is not the team that it was supposed to be. Like, it's all well and good that Ramon Laureano has like an 8-something OPS, but he's batting 5th for this team. Like, show me a world where that's a good thing. Like, show me a world where good things are happening and that's also happening. I don't think those two go hand in hand. So I think that, and I guess it might lead to one of two things. It might lead to, this is going to happen anyways. And like, let's rip the Band-Aid off. This is the time to do it. We just lost a terrible game where we left 1 million guys on base and we made like boneheaded plays to lose. And the owner was sitting in the front row. And then he asked me what was going on. I said, shoot, I don't really know. And then the manager sat in front of a microphone and said, I don't even know either. And then somebody at some point said, what are we doing here? That's a real sequence of events that could happen. I'm not saying that's the one that did, but like, as we're all thinking about how this happened, I don't think this was a decision that was taken lightly. We can't know what the actual motivations and the hopes were until we hear from Mike Elias in depth. But I think there's a lot that went into it, and I don't think I'm not personally holding space in my brain for the idea that this season is going to go worse because of backlash of Brandon Hyde getting fired.
Gotcha. That's fair. I mean, I perhaps I am reading too much into that Dean Kramer quote. to me stuck out to me because, we have yet to hear anything, no player's going to say something bad about a manager who's just fired, but every player has stuck up for Brandon Hyde for the most part and said this was our fault.
Yeah, as they should on both counts.
Yeah.
It is their fault, and they, as they should stand up for the manager. I would just posit that I would just respond to that with the question of what does anyone in that clubhouse have to gain by like downing tools and being like, you know what? The season stinks. Our off season was terrible. We never had a chance. Now I have to go play baseball every day for 4.5 months, and nothing good's going to happen. So I'm just out.
Right.
None of the pending free agents have any hope for that. None of the guys who are years away from free agency are going to have any interest in doing that, because if they want to leave, tough cookies, you can't for a very long time. And the way you get paid and make money in this league is by producing. So like you stick your finger in their eye if that's what you think. Like the thing that they're doing, that they have done, and that's not to say that like scoring runs against the back end of the Nats bullpen when you're losing by 10 runs is a good thing, but the way that this offense looks good again is, even if they're losing by a ton, score some runs, hit some homers, get some traffic. Like this is 3 games in a row now where they have at least looked like they had a chance to do something late in the game. That's how you get your OPS up. That's how you perform as a player you want to do. I remember sitting underneath, like outside the batting cage in Fredericksburg, Virginia, with Jackson Holliday in his first, I think it was his first season. It might have been the next year, like the first full season. It might have been right after he got drafted, but he was like, he gets so many at bats here. Like he's having like 5-6 plate batting leadoff. You're
right.
5-6 plate appearances a game. And he's like, it's like, you can make an out to end the 7th. And you're like, oh, that's it. Then you get to hit again in the 9th, and you get to get a hit again. And he was so excited. He was like, this is great. Like I get so many more, like I can have so many more hits than I thought I would. Like go do that. Like, yes, teams get to stack up their bullpen exactly how they want to when they're winning by runs, and you're not going to be facing like the scrubs when you're down 5 like you would be up 5. You can't really feast off those, but just what is stopping this team from just like saying screw it? Like these hitters especially need to like they need to produce in those situations. And and that is, Brandon Hyde said it himself at one point, like take some selfish at bats, like go out there and like, not to say like only try to hit home runs, but like go out there. If your team's losing, like say, I would still like to go 2 for 4 today, like, and make that happen.
Right. And I think you're seeing that from some of the veterans. I mean, I think Ramon Laureano is doing that to a T. I think he's somebody who has, we talked about Cedric Mullins at the start of the season. He compartmentalizes very well. He goes out there. He's been on some awful Orioles teams, and he still produced during those seasons. He had his 30-30 season during one of the worst years in Orioles history. Ramon Laureano doesn't seem phased regardless of the score. He's going out there and he's a professional ball player. He gets paid to do this. He's going out there and he's hitting. It seems like you see some of the younger guys go out there and they are more affected by this winning and losing. I am happy to see that Jackson Holliday is still batting leadoff now that Brandon Hyde is not the manager anymore. This is something we talked about before the season. He batted leadoff pretty much throughout his minor league career, and he is this. If there is a silver lining from this season, it's that Jackson Holliday looks more and more every day like the guy that the Orioles expected him to be, the guy that we thought he was going to be. And it took him a little bit of time, but that's because he's 21 years old. So looks like you got another future star in the infield, which is an exciting development for this season, on a season that really needs as many exciting developments as possible.
Yeah. It's wild how that works. It's wild how that works. That good players end up being good players. And I keep harping on this, and it seems like Colton Cowser will be back soon-ish, and that'll be another person who is batting in the top half of the lineup who is good.
Yeah.
And Jordan Westberg, I don't know, but like that's another one. And you just, I don't know if I've said this on this podcast or just said it, but like the part where this team like storms back and misses the playoffs by like 3 games is going to be yes, there will be like good vibes from like finishing the season really well if that happens, but like it will feel worse to have left this season on the table if that happens than to have like gotten like dusted out of the playoffs in an hour and a half the last 2 years.
Well, and that's what I want to talk about, because we're at this point now, 16 games under 500, and I talked about on the podcast a couple days ago that the example that I kept looking at for a team that started off horrendously and it was able to turn it around and make a miraculous run is the 2019 Washington Nationals that won the World Series. They were 19-31 famously. They were struggling through their first 50 games. They go on this insane run in the final 4 months of the season and end up winning the World Series. But the Washington Nationals that season were playing better baseball through their first 50 games than the Orioles were.
Yeah.
However, the Washington Nationals also didn't have a bunch of guys on the IL that were just waiting to come back. They were just losing games with their healthy team. The Orioles have a bunch of guys on the IL that could be coming back. However, 16 games under 500 in this division is an awfully large hole to climb out of. And with each passing day, now that they have lost 7 in a row, it feels less and less likely, because it is less and less likely that they can make a run to the playoffs. And if this does end up being a lost season, that is a disaster. And that blame pie is an absolutely massive culinary delight.
Yes.
Because because at some point down the road, I mean, I think we should talk about, if this season does end up falling into complete disarray, I'd like to talk about how, maybe a 1-year reset might not be the worst thing for this team, for the health of the franchise long term, because the farm system is no longer top 10, because they have so many guys on these expiring contracts, and because they desperately need to refresh the arms that they have at the big league level and in the minor leagues. However, if they have truly wasted the 2025 season, you have wasted a season of a prime Gunnar Henderson year, what should have been a prime Adley Rutschman year, a prime Jordan Westburg year, although he's been hurt, prime Colton Cowser year. You are wasting a very, very talented roster, and a roster that in some areas is so woefully bad that they're not able to overcome anything and get back to the, to competitiveness. And so for a team that is in a smaller market that has a very clearly defined competitive window that opened in 2023, to have to punt on one of those years is not a good outcome. And it should not be seen as anything positive, because it is a bad, awful thing for the team to have wasted a year in the middle of a competitive window.
Yes. Yes, it is. I think there's a lot that goes into how that happened, and we don't need to get into all of it, but I think there's something to be said for separating this out from like the rest of the stuff. Like, yeah, if it's only 2 more years of Adley Rutschman, like after this, shoot, that's not a lot. That puts a lot of pressure on the next couple of years. I am sitting here as we're doing this, doing the math that I always say I can't do in the moment in my head. And this team basically has to win at like a 650 winning percentage to get to 90 wins this year. They've done that since the start of 2023. They did that in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different months over the course of 2 seasons, which is doable.
But that's a month.
That's a month. Yeah. You could
Not
do
a
it
whole
over
season.
You could do it over. Yeah. I mean, they
Or 4 months.
basically did it for the first half of last year. I think I struggle with this. I struggle with a lot of things, as I've tried to make very clear on this podcast and the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe for $1 for 6 months and have a newsletter, Inside the Dugout, for subscribers only.
Nice.
Which is celebrating its birthday this week. 1 year of Inside the Dugout.
Gotta get you a cake.
I was just talking to someone. I was like, I think we used all the celebration budget on the Pulitzer, and rightfully so. But if there was a baked goods budget for the newsletter department, I think the Inside the Dugout would get one. It would just be a therapy couch based on what we wrote last week. But I find it really, really challenging to not view this season in the context of like what's going to happen going forward. And I'm not saying that I am actively like withholding judgment and criticism. Because things could get better, I'm just feeling like, if we're talking about such an extreme outcome on the negative side, are we going to be sitting here in the offseason being like, wow, they still have a really good lineup. Wow, Kyle Bradish and Tyler Wells and Grayson Rodriguez and Dean Kramer and big boy starter X are a really good rotation. And wow, Felix Bautista is still a dominant closer. And wow, XY. That's going to make for a really tortured 4.5 months as this all goes to shit. But honestly, it's hard for me not to think like that. And I think it's probably hard for them not to think about that. I'm gesturing broadly towards the warehouse. And that doesn't make what's happening now okay. I think I don't know when I was having this thought, but I was having this thought recently that for me specifically, I stopped caring about watching a team lose baseball games when they were losing a lot of baseball games, because it ultimately didn't matter to me or anything else. And I think I'm having a harder time than I should separating that out now, because it does matter and it's all over. And I feel like I spent a lot of time as this was all getting to this point being this is bad. You need to stop losing, which is true and did not happen. And, shame on them for letting it get to this point. But it's going to be a really weird year, and it can go one of two ways. This could just be a pack it in year, another pack it in year, basically considering how the second half of last year went, or these guys could be we can't do this for 2 more years. We can't do this for 3 more years. This is not going to be our careers, because that's not fun. And I think when that's the case, you have to consider things could get better, but they're not going to. 650 winning percentage for 4.5 months is really hard to do, especially when most games you're losing by 5 runs in the first inning.
Yeah. And it's an awful lot of pressure on Tony Mansolino, who doesn't have any big league managerial experience. We talked about when the Orioles fired Brandon Hyde, when they were considering firing Brandon Hyde and fans were calling for it, that this is a coaching staff that does not have a whole lot of big league managerial experience. Robinson Chirinos is on his first big league staff, and he's the bench coach. Brock Britton has plenty of minor league managerial experience, but none in the major leagues. So Tony Mansolino made the most sense as somebody to jump in. But I think fans saw his quote last night after the game where he said, quote, "I'm fortunate to have French," as in Drew French, "and Chirinos and Klimek and Ashy and all these guys around me to where they're making sure we don't miss something. They're on top of it. I'm getting closer to being on top of it." And I think people have a hard time understanding what goes into being a manager. There are a lot of responsibilities that fall on the manager that we don't always see on the field. Tony Mansolino is at this point in his career, he said, where he did not expect to be getting a managerial gig for maybe 10 years. He is still in his 40s. He is still not experienced enough to be getting this kind of job. And now all of his lieutenants are also inexperienced as well. It's not like he has a right-hand man, to the point where, after his first game as manager, I heard him getting some points from PR as to how he had to conduct the post-game press conference. He was walking into the room and didn't fully know what the timetable was of these things, how he had to respond in these things. So that is something that goes into the job that Brandon Hyde, regardless of how he was doing as a manager, pulling the levers on the field. Lever is our word of the day. We're saying it so much.
Yes.
On the field, that is something he knew how to do. And so we're now seeing, for the fans that said, do something, fire Brandon Hyde, the reason that this team, I think, was hesitant to do so, in part because of the history with Michael Elias and Brandon Hyde. But another reason is they didn't have an in-house replacement that had managerial experience. And now we're seeing with Tony Mansolino, sure, this team could go on an insane 650 win percentage run the second half of the season. Are you going to be able to do it with somebody who's never managed at the big leagues before, who has to learn all this stuff on the fly while his team is floundering? It's a tough spot for Mansolino to be in, and it's a tough spot for this organization to be in right now.
Yeah. I think I do think that the idea that the Orioles didn't bring back Freddie Gonzalez, who was basically put onto the staff after the 2019 season for this reason.
Yes.
I think that is a signal that this was not, in the cards. This was definitely not something that was going to happen in their minds. But literally what has happened this year that they were this is exactly how we thought it was going to go.
Yep.
So put that into its own category. I didn't necessarily take that as like a bad thing. I think that it's good to take feedback from those, like from the people around you. I think that the more voices who are helping inform decisions in the moment, like, can help you make good ones.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I certainly didn't read that quote and get I didn't have the same reaction that some fans did, which was, whoa, this guy's in over his head. It's just an understanding that this is a difficult job for a human to be thrust into.
yes, and it would be difficult for anyone. And
Yes.
I think that, I also think there's not showmanship. I don't think we're getting an act right now, but there's two ways to go about this. When somebody who helped you become a major league coach and has been your boss, peer, whatever you want to call it, for this long goes, like, it would send a very strange message to be like, you know what? He did a great job, but I'm going to do a great job too. Like, I got this. This team's losing left and right, and any which way you could possibly lose. But that was under the old manager, and now I have managed one major league game, two major league games, three major league games, and I got this. Like, everybody get out of my ear. Like, look out, it's the Manso show. Like, that's not what's going to happen here. This is somebody who is dealing with this truthfully exactly how I would deal with it. If you stuck me in that job and put microphones and cameras in my face, I'd be like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. Like, this is a lot. I'm trying to figure it out, because he is. I don't know. And I think this goes to kind of, this week's newsletter is about the Brandon Hyde era, to the extent there is one. And, good managers are teams whose baseball teams win, or managers whose baseball teams win. Bad managers are managers whose baseball teams lose. Tony Mansolino will be a good manager if the Orioles get healthy and get right and start producing, and the hitters start producing, and the bullpen moves start working. And Tony Mansolino will not work out as a major league manager if things stay the same as they were.
Yeah. John, you're losing your voice, which I'm a little concerned about.
It's okay. It's just a little bit of phlegm. I'm not sick, though. I promise, Paul. Remember that? Like, all winter, I'd just be like, not sick.
Please, I'm just coughing and mucus is flying everywhere. One more thing before we get out of here. We do have to do our minor league check-in segment, because that is becoming increasingly important. But this guy is in the major leagues. He's just somebody who's been in the minor leagues up until this past week, when he made his big league debut, and that's Kade Strowd. Becomes the first pitcher ever drafted by Mike Elias to make his big league debut in Baltimore. Kade Strowd is a big leaguer. John, for those who don't know Kade Strowd and what he brings to the table, what can you tell us about a guy who was added to the 40-man roster to protect him from the Rule 5 draft over the winter? Yeah, big stuff. Throws the heck out of the ball. Really good pitches, on a spreadsheet, on a computer. His dots, as they would say, are really impressive, and it's just a matter of how consistently he can locate them in the strike zone where he wants to. That's the case for a lot of young pitchers. He's been around for a very long time. From that 2019 draft, I believe he's the only holdover. There might be one other from that draft class that's still kicking around the organization somewhere. It's really, I suppose, fitting that he's like the first, that this has happened, that the first person to make it to the big leagues that the Orioles drafted, because the stuff is really, really good. It is major league caliber stuff. And there was times, like, even like as last season was going on, like, you can't keep exposing stuff like that to the Rule 5 draft forever. He was eligible for a few, didn't get taken. The Orioles finally protected him. It's a really interesting package, and it's the kind of pitcher who, I don't know how long he will get to stay in the majors, but you're going to have nights where you're just not happy with it, probably, but you're going to have nights where it's okay and it's going to get better. And we talk about maybe they don't need Kyle Gibsons of the world in the Norfolk rotation, just in case at this point. Like, this is the kind of stuff you bet on. If Kade Strowd was designated for assignment by another team, the Orioles probably would try to claim him, because it's good stuff and it's controllable and it's up and down. And you want to have those guys in your bullpen more than you want to have guys who are not going to be part of the future. Yeah, it is kind of funny now that we're seeing Kade Strowd and Maverick Hanley actually make the big leagues, guys that you've covered in the minor leagues for a long time. I mean, since 2019. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to go through, because it's multiple notebooks and who knows where they are. But like, I've probably seen Kade Strowd pitch so many times. Yep. Yeah. It's also funny. Baseball timelines are so weird. Juan Soto got paid at 26. He got $765 million. And he is younger than Maverick Hanley when Maverick Hanley this year made his big league debut. Like, Maverick Hanley is 27.
Yeah.
And he was in the same draft class as Adley Rutschman, like playing college baseball with Stanford when Adley Rutschman was playing at Oregon State. Like, Juan Soto has lapped them. He got his second contract before Maverick Hanley made his big league debut. It's just wild.
Yeah, that's
you don't see that in other sports.
No, you don't. It's like there's something funny like that in football where like Lamar Jackson's like younger than somebody that got drafted last year. Was Jaden Daniels or
it might have been.
Yeah, like they're the same age.
Roughly,
like that. I don't know. This is the wrong podcast.
I mean, Tyler Shuck who got drafted by the Saints is like, I think he was the backup for like Justin Herbert or something in college. Like that is how old he is. So you do see it in football, not in the NBA. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I'd wait till we get these NIL heroes who are spending like 6 years in college baseball.
True. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. At John Meoli is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Like, rate, review, subscribe anywhere that you are listening to the podcast. Very much appreciate 5 stars, a thumbs up, and a nice review. For John Meoli, I'm Paul Mancano. We'll be back at some point next week. Hopefully, we'll have less breaking news to discuss. Hopefully, things will settle down just a little bit. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Sign your hate mail, cowards.
Yeah, put your name on it if you're going to send John snail mail, but don't do it anyway. Thanks so much for